I made a video yesterday about how hearing God's voice brings joy, and I kind of wanted to do a little follow-up video about how to hear God's voice and just that you can hear God's voice. I wanted to say, first of all, that it's easy, so you can take the pressure off, that it's so easy to hear God's voice, that He's always speaking. He's speaking, even if we aren't hearing Him at the moment, He's always speaking. And He speaks through the littlest things. His voice doesn't always have to be literally a voice in your head. Like, His voice is quiet and simple and small sometimes and really sweet. And it can be like the tiniest thing. Like, I have a friend that picks up pennies on the ground every time she sees them, and that's a way that God speaks to her. And so little tiny things that you see or notice can be a language that you have with God, and you can just know that He's speaking to you through those things. So I wanted to say just it's easy, and that it's a relationship. When you have a friendship or a relationship with, like, just imagine your best friend, you're not always asking your best friend, like, what do I do now? What do I do next? What do you think about this? Like, a lot of a friendship is just, it's just back and forth, like almost what other people would say is meaningless stuff. But when it's between two friends that love each other, it's not meaningless. It's life. It's important. It's life-giving. It's all the little tiny things. It's the process. It's the little thoughts, the feelings, just the little ins and outs of your day. And I think that that is a really important key when we're talking about hearing God's voice, is that He is a friend. As much as He's God, He is a friend, and He is safe, and He's simple and gentle and sweet, just like a best friend. And He will listen to meaningless things that it's not meaningless to Him. Like, if you just are saying, like, sometimes I'll just say to God, like, oh, I feel scared right now, or I feel sad, and I just will hear Him right back be like, oh, I'm so sorry, like that's so hard, I'm so sorry. And it's not even like, okay, here's all the ways to get unscared or unsad or like fixing your problem. Like, I would say a good friend isn't always trying to do that. A good friend is just a listening ear and a nurturing, comforting place, and just like somebody that is there. And that is who God is. He's somebody that is always there. That's one of His names in the Bible, is just the God who is there. That's one of my favorite qualities about God. I love that. It's just really special that He's there and He listens to the little small things. And it's not like always that your conversation with Him has to be about something that's a big deal. Like, literally, this is a strange story, but I think it might encourage someone. One time I was trying really hard to plug something into a plug, and it just wouldn't work. And I was getting really frustrated, and I kind of said to God, like, this is making me mad. I can't plug it in. And I just felt like He was kind of laughing, and He was like, just try the other plug. And there was another one right there. And I was like, okay. And I plugged it in, and it worked. And it sounds silly, but it was like the meaningless things that's the conversation I would have with a friend or with my fiance. Like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Why isn't this plug working? And then he'd be like, oh, there's one you can try there. And then it would work. And I think that that's just a small example of the little things we can talk to God about. It doesn't have to be like, okay, God, what's my destiny? Or what do I need to do with the next 5 years of my life? Or who am I going to marry? Or what country am I going to live in? And let me tell you, God has an opinion on those things, and He loves to talk to us about those things just as much. But He loves the small things and the simple things, and He's in them. And I think that's a way for us to practice hearing His voice, is just the little tiny things like the plug. You can just say, why isn't this working? Or, like, why isn't my key working in the door? Or He gives little ideas, and sometimes He doesn't have anything to say. He just is there, and He's like laughing with you, or He's like, I'm so sorry you feel that way. Or you can do it, like, you got this, just like a little nudge here and there. It's a relationship. So I wanted to encourage you, you can hear His voice. If you hear something in your head that's saying that to you, that's God's voice. It's not always dramatic and big. Like, His voice is a friendship, and it's soft and quiet and gentle and sweet and really kind. His voice is always kind. I want to reiterate that His voice is always kind, and it's always on your side. He is your greatest ally. He is totally for you. His voice is innocent and pure and sweet, and it's not judging, it's not shaming, it's not condemning, and it's His kindness that leads us to repentance. Like, even if there's sin in your life, He's not going to be condemning about it, or like, that's when you sit and talk with Him, that is not going to be the first thing that He points out. It's always His kindness. Like, you're incredible, you can do it, you're better than this, like, you deserve the best, is the voice that His voice is going to say, that type of thing. So it's a relationship. It's like a best friendship. And then something that Carissa said in a video that I loved is that his voice isn't high stakes. And I think that that's something we need to remind ourselves of. Is she said that somebody had told her, who's like a teacher of children, the teacher said, if I say something and I can tell the children are distracted or they're not listening, I don't leave the room, I don't go silent, and I don't get angry. Like, that is not what a teacher does when she's trying to get children to pay attention. That's not what a mother does. She says she repeats it, or she'll say it a little bit louder, or she'll do something that she needs to do to get the children's attention. So that's the way God is. If he's talking to you and you don't hear him or you miss it, it's not high stakes. He is not going to be like, okay, I'm done. I tried and you didn't hear me the first time, so I'm leaving and you can figure your life out. Or he, like 100%, God would never do that. Or he's not gonna just be like, well, I'm not gonna talk to you until you decide to listen. Or I'm just gonna sit here until you ask me what I was trying to say. Like, he doesn't get offended at us. He is constant, and he is always going to try again. And he is going to say it again, and he's going to say it again, and he is not going to get impatient with you. He is love. He does not get impatient. He does not leave you. So if you need to hear from God, he will let you know in a very kind way, and you will hear it. So don't feel like you have this huge thing, like this high stakes thing, like I'm going to miss God's voice if I try it, and I don't hear it, like something bad is going to happen. That's not the way God is. And then sometimes we think we hear God's voice and it's not God's voice. And I want to say that is okay. Like, just take the pressure off of yourself. That is part of learning to hear his voice. I just want to take the pressure off of you. Like, when you're prophesying over someone or praying for them or asking God about an encouraging word for somebody, go for it, take a risk, because more often than not, if it's a good thing, it's from God. But sometimes you're going to get it wrong, and I would say that is part of the beauty, that's part of the journey. I would say the more you just go for it and try, the more likely you're going to continue to hear his voice right. But if you don't have a risk because you're afraid of getting it wrong, it's a lot harder to hear his voice. I was going to talk about two things that I've noticed personally in my life that keep me from hearing God's voice. Again, I would like to reiterate, it's not God that's not talking to you. God's not silent. It's often us. So the two things that I feel like why I can't hear God's voice is when I'm really afraid, when it feels really high stakes, like I have to hear him on this, like, is it this or this? Or I would be really, really afraid if he said this, like if he said to do this, I don't know if I could hear that answer. Then I'm not gonna really be able to hear God if I'm really afraid. And then the other thing is if I feel like I'm not good enough, which is something I struggle with a lot. If I feel like I'm not good enough, like I haven't been good enough that day, if I haven't been kind enough or sweet enough, or if I haven't measured up to, in my mind, God's standard of me, I've totally noticed that makes me feel like I'm not going to hear his voice, which is not true. I was thinking about how God said, my sheep hear my voice in the Bible, but he also says he leaves his 99 sheep to find the one sheep. And so even if you're the one sheep that's not in the flock, that's like gone running off somewhere, you're still his sheep and you can still hear his voice. So it's not high stakes. Like, you don't have to be good enough. You don't have to measure up to anything. And if you're feeling like, oh, I haven't been a good enough Christian, or I haven't read my Bible enough, or I haven't something enough to hear God's voice, or I'm not the prophetic personality, or I'm not whatever, like, just take it off yourself. He wants to talk to you no matter what you think about yourself, no matter what you've done or haven't done. He wants to talk to you, and he is talking to you, consistently talking to you. So you can just take that not good enough to hear his voice thing totally off of yourself, because that's not the truth. That is the enemy trying to get you to not hear a good voice of a good father. And I'm saying that to myself because that is a struggle of mine. Because I was sitting here thinking, like, God, why don't I feel like I always hear your voice? Like, there's days where I feel like I hear it consistently, and then there's days when I don't. And I felt like he was saying, it's not that I'm not talking, it's more that you sometimes feel like you're not worthy to hear it. So I wanted to just say you're worthy to hear his voice, like, all the time, 24/7, no matter what you've done, you can hear his voice. Like, he wants to talk to you, and he loves you, and he is running to you with open arms. That's the way he is. That's the good father that he is. So those are some things I wanted to say about hearing God's voice. And I wanted to say it one more time, it is easy. It's easy to hear God's voice. He's constantly talking. He's talking in the little things. He's kind and he's gentle, and it's not high stakes. And just start asking him about the craziest, tiniest, random things, like you would talk to your best friend on the phone. Yeah, I want everyone to hear God's voice. It's a joy. It's a pleasure. It's one of the greatest, I think, delights of life when you can just hear his voice. And so I hope that today you have an increase in hearing God's voice, and that he becomes such a close friend to you that you hear him. The Bible says whether you turn to the right or the left, you're going to hear my voice saying, this is the way, walk in it. And I hope and pray that for you as you watch this today, that you'll hear his voice whether you turn to the right or the left, whatever you're doing with your day. He's your best friend. He's right there with you, that you're completely not alone, no matter what you feel, think, have done, or haven't done, that you are not alone, and he's constantly talking, and he's there with you. Have a wonderful weekend. Bless you guys.